alliance will be the likely mini NATO in Asia?
This kind of 5-4-3-2 is only used for against one country, China. Okay, and I think this is reasonable because when Biden ran the presidential elections, he also already mentioned that U.S. foreign policy should go back to multilateral, using diplomatic ways. Also try to bring his alliances back to his kind of influences. Okay, he said he would take care of those alliances. They will not let them fight alone. So this kind of strategy, we can say, is more kind of we call offshore balancing.
Welcome to TaiwanPlus Point. This is your host, Victoria Liu. Today we have two guests. Dr. Chengchi Wu, Associate Professor of Department of Diplomacy, National Chengchi University. Dr. Chenlung Kuo, Deputy Managing Editor of United Daily News, one of the leading newspapers in Taiwan. We're going to interview both Dr. Wu and Mr. Kuo on the latest geopolitical issues. So glad to have you here on the set. Dr. Wu, we would like to ask you that, what do you believe will be the likely outcome of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
So I'm kind of pessimistic right now because it seems like Putin has more ambitions. He spent a lot of money. We know he spent about 9,000 million US dollars. Then also he lost about 26,000 people every day. All the losses is more than his war on Afghanistan, the Russian war on Afghanistan. So this area, this we call the limited war, will be a prolonged limited war in the future. Because if Ukraine keep defending with a lot of financial and military assistance from the Western, then Putin, he cannot get what he wants, right? The same thing for Ukraine, for Zelensky. He is also a rational leader, right? Because he need to fight back. He cannot give up any territories, especially Donbas areas. If he can give up Donbas areas, he will do it already, right? So, like what I say, both are rational leaders, and based on these rationalities, assumptions, the war will be hard to stop. This is what I'm thinking right now.
Given that it's going to be a prolonged war between Ukraine and Russia, but some people are arguing that United States is the biggest winner right now. On the one hand, President Biden had successfully weakened Putin in a sense. And also it has successfully rallied the NATO allies. Now NATO is the hot topic. Everyone wants to join NATO these days. And thirdly, people are saying that he has successfully isolated China in a sense. Do you agree with that?
There's another reason, the causes for this conflict this time. I call it alliances. Alliances are very critical and crucial factors when we analyze or study interstate conflicts. We know NATO is a defensive alliance, which means you attack one, you attack all. And the most important thing is we need to look at what the relation between NATO and the Russia and Ukraine relations for the past 8 years. Some observation and arguments say the overexpansion of NATO is the major causes to Putin this time. This is why Putin wants to show his ambitions and even initiate the conflicts to Ukraine, because first, he'll worry about the NATO expansion, okay? And the second thing is, we know that from theories, if there's alliances, and it's a great power alliances, in history, in 16, 17, and 20 centuries, all great power alliances are followed by war within 5 years. And those wars are great powers war. So which means if United States want to use NATO as a, we call it the mechanism, security mechanism, as a kind of tool to intervene in Ukraine crisis, it will become the second or another would say great power alliances. And then probably will get into a big war in the future. So I also worry about that because Putin already mentioned that. He also deterred that if the Western society keep using this kind of expansion of NATO, he will not give up using the nuclear weapons. Especially the Finland now want to join the NATO. So if the Finland join the NATO, and also Sweden joined the NATO, and it's already getting to the gate of Russia. So there will be, I can see it's part kind of pre-World War III scenario. So those liberals in the Europe, also, and, as well as American foreign policy decision makers, they need to be very careful and very wise, okay, when they want to use NATO as a kind of security mechanism in the Europe continent.
In that case, how would the current trilateral relations between Russia, China, and the US evolve?
This is a very good question. I was also interested in this kind of trilateral relations. Usually we can say that China and Russian people, they don't have that kind of good relations in history. They even have conflicts before, okay, territorial conflicts. Some political science scholars like John Mearsheimer, we all know that, very famous offensive realist. He mentioned that why American use the wrong foreign policy to push Chinese people and Russian people together. Okay, look at what they, the Beijing and Moscow, what they did. During the Winter Olympic Games, they have a joint statement about how these two countries, they kind of cooperate to kind of, create some mutual dialogue, share some security interests. And also they say they want to defend the external intervene from the Western society on their sovereignties. So we can say even before this time, the war starts, Beijing and Moscow, they already achieved some consensus between Xi Jinping and Putin. So this is why not only John Mearsheimer, I think Stephen Ward too, he mentioned, U.S. foreign policies for the past decades, especially during the past 3 presidents, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama, they made the same mistakes. What kind of mistakes? They used, we call the hell of good intentions. Okay, the book called The Hell of Good Intentions. They want to, the American decision maker, foreign policy decision makers, as well as the leaders, they want to spread this kind of liberal hegemony, okay, to the world. American types of democracy. However, they keep making mistakes, not only in Iraq, Afghanistan. Now they also made a mistake in Ukraine. So probably it's time for them to kind of switch or adjust their foreign policy. Okay, so for the trilateral relationship between China and Russia and United States, if Biden maintain this kind of we call balancing strategy in Europe, which means using NATO to engage in the conflicts, then he will need to spend a lot of money and budget, even the diplomats in this area. This will reduce his capabilities to contain China's rise. Because we all know that Biden's main target and potential strategic competitor is China, is Beijing, not Moscow. However, if Biden, he still eyes on this in Ukraine, he still want to win the war, he will be swamped in this area. Okay, and Biden also want to pivot to Asia, Indo-Pacific. So how can they do this kind of we call the two fronts competitions? Is a very important and also critical issues in the future.
I'd like to bring to the focus for this discussion is that President Biden is coming to Asia, either rightly or wrongly, that he wants to put up a coalition against China. Either it's going through the AUKUS between United States, Australia, and Great Britain, or it's going through the Quad, the 4 countries alliance. Do you think, first of all, do you think it will work? The second is, which alliance will be the likely mini NATO in Asia?
Yeah, these are great questions. I mean, some, also some, people with different opinions, they say Biden using not diplomacy, is kind of, we say realist alliances, this type of ideas to try to group their own friends and or their allies in these regions by the 5-4-3-2, the metaphors. The 5 is the 5 eyes alliances in technology. 4 is the 4 Quad. 3 is the AUKUS, the 3 countries. And 2 is the individual bilateral security alliances with Asian countries. For example, Japan-U.S. alliances and South Korea and U.S. alliances. So this kind of 5-4-3-2 is only used for against one country, it's China. Okay, and I think this is reasonable because when Biden ran the presidential elections, he also already mentioned that U.S. foreign policy should go back to multilateral, using diplomatic ways. Also try to bring his alliances back to his kind of influences. Okay, he said he would take care of those alliances. They will not let them fight alone. So this kind of strategy, we can say, is more kind of we call offshore balancing strategy in academia. Okay? What's called offshore balancing? What's the difference between offshore balance and onshore balance? Usually when Americans using the foreign policy, they use onshore balance. Means he used their own national capability to balance against the regional rising hegemony. For example, he fought Iran, he fought Iraq, he fought Afghanistan. Even before they fought in Vietnam, right? This is called onshore balance. But like what I say, Stephen Wu mentioned that, he said it's kind of costly, expensive, and you've made a lot of wrong mistakes. What's called offshore balancing is you ask your allies to counterbalance against the potential hegemon in that region. For example, in Europe, they use Ukraine to counterbalance against Moscow. In Asia, they have 2 very faithful allies. One is South Korea, one is Japan. Okay, some people say Taiwan, but we can talk about this later. So this is why Biden wants to visit Asia this time, especially, there are 2 new leaders in South Korea and Japan. Those leaders, they are also very kind of hawkish to Chinese government. So this is why we need to be very, very careful about what's going on and what will they make kind of statements after the trips this time. Especially Biden will go to join the Quad Summit. Okay, and Chonglun, you mentioned there's very important issues, the NATO in Asia. Why there's no NATO in Asia? I think this is also a very important topic, and we discussed in academia before. There's one very important thing is we used to have this kind of NATO in Asia. We call CETO. In Cold War, it's United States with some South Asian countries. However, after in 1950s, 60s, the CETO disappeared. Okay, but look at right now, the East Asia and South Asia. Will we have a NATO in the future? There are some key actors we need to look. For example, the ASEAN countries. What's ASEAN country attitude? Okay, they use this kind of, we call the neutrality, neutral, and also non-alignment movements for a long time. Okay, so will they allow a new NATO in this area for the future? We need to put a question mark. Japan and South Korea, will they cooperate together to join and create a new NATO? This is also a very interesting question because South Korea, they used to have a bandwagon and also balancing mixed strategy we call hedging. Okay, South Korea can be categorized as a hedger in this kind of, we call the alliances.
Dr. Wu, you mentioned a lot of things, actually a number of things to discuss, okay? It's a matter of cost and it's a matter of time. So can you elaborate more?
I mean on
the NATO in Southeast Asia alliances.
Okay, South Asian countries, they are smart, okay? People are also, they want to understand what those leaders in ASEAN they are thinking about. First, they have a very important principle we call the ASEAN way. ASEAN way means each country in this group, they will not interfere the domestic affairs for each country. For example, when they have human rights issues, even the ASEAN members, they will not criticize each other. They also don't want the external other powers to criticize them. Also, when they talk about the great powers competition in these areas, ASEAN means they want to bring all the great powers in. They don't want to lean to each side. They don't want to lean to China's side or try to lean to United States side. Instead, they use the term we call omni-enmeshment. They want to bring everybody in. So this is, the scholars in Southeast Asia publish a lot of papers about hedging. Okay, we can talk about this later. What's called hedging? What's the definition of hedging? And their idea is totally different from what we think in Taiwan, and also different from Japanese thinking in Japan. Okay, so I think this is a very key question. I hope I answered your questions.
So, Mr. Kuo, so what's your take on this? What's your opinion, especially for the Southeast Asia part?
Southeast Asia had its own unique way of approaching the global conflict. For instance, during this Ukraine war, there's no general policy for Southeast Asia. Only Singapore stand out and support the United States and putting sanctions on Russia. But other Southeast Asian countries, they are taking a more neutral stance. Because part of it, because a lot of them getting their weapons from Russia, and they also traded with Russia. They don't want to offend Russia in a sense. But this kind of neutral stance sometimes will let them caught in a difficult position when something happened to themselves. For instance, the South China Sea issues. And they are hoping that the U.S. can come to defend. But sometimes, if they did not put up what they really like to do, sometimes that when you are facing China, that will make them in a very difficult position. I don't know whether you agree with this or not.
Yeah, let me jump up some discussion here. Well, Southeast Asia, they are also very flexible on their foreign policies, especially when they decide the security and the economics affairs. They view China as a potential and also huge market, okay, for the trade, for the goods, for the human services. So they have very tight linked with China on economy. But security, they also worry about the territorial issues, especially on South China Sea. Okay, so if you talk to Filipinos, Vietnamese people, they will say, "What's going on in South China Sea? Hey, you need to help us, right?" So they use this kind of we call double hedging on both economy and also security. The economy, they want to link to China's side. However, security, they also want to bring the United States to this region, okay, to try to maintain certain kind of stability in these areas. So far, I can say they're doing good. They're doing good, okay. But like what I say, in the future, if the Sino-US they really have some problems, they will probably they ask them to choose sides. Then ASEAN they need to make some decisions.
Dr. Wu, there is one thing might be interesting as well. Okay, with the new Korean President Yoon, do you think the U.S.-Japan-Korea alliance will be strengthened against North Korea and perhaps also against China?
Yeah, like what I say, I talked to Chenlung. I'm not a North Korean expert. However, from my perspective and my analysis, the first thing I would say, both are democracies. South Korea, Japan, and United States. They're all democracies. Democracies have certain kind of characteristics. First, they are more likely to form alliances to each other because they know each other better. And their culture, their rule of law, and also their ideas know each other better. Also, they are transparent to each other. Okay, we know there's some characteristics for democracy because they have free media, freedom of speech. So it's easy to get information in these countries. So democracy, they know each other, they know, and they also use non-violent way to solve issues. So this is why they're more likely to form alliances. And once they form alliances, they are also more likely to comply to the alliances, treaties, or any kind of agreement they write. Okay, this is the characteristic of democracy. So based on this kind of spirits and also this kind of arguments, the United States right now, they know, this is why Biden keep mentioning it. They want to democracy, rule of law, human values, this kind of ideas to try to bring the alliance together, strengthen the alliances, and try to make it a safe place. We use the term security community. Okay, they use the term security community. Within the community, everybody shares similar ideas, which is democracy, and they learn each other, and they know each other, and provide a more secure and stable international order in these areas. So I think Biden, this time the trip to South Korea and Japan, he used these kind of ideas and he wants to strengthen these ideas to these two countries. Okay, and whether these three countries will join together, have we call a alliances treaty or trilateral alliance treaty, I don't know. There's a lot of questions on these issues, especially between Japan and South Korea.
People are saying that there were three major security concerns that nowadays in Indo-Pacific. One is that Ziding had just mentioned is the North Korean nuclear issues. The second we just discussed is the South China Sea. And the third will be closer to us, will be Taiwan Strait, especially the possibility of China invading Taiwan in sometime in the future. We know from the recent Financial Times report that the U.S. have been doing a high-level consultation with Great Britain regarding the possible Taiwan scenario, that in case if China invaded Taiwan, whether the United States or Britain will get into a war with China. And U.S. have done the similar consultation with Australia and with Japan as well. So do you see there's a possibility that the U.S. want to bring the Great Britain into this Indo-Pacific security arena? This is because already they have established AUKUS back in Australia. Three countries are joining, become alliance. Do you think that Great Britain would be having a more a role in the security arena here?
When we talk about the geopolitics in Asia, we usually don't really think about the UK. First of all, it's politically irrelevant, it's too far away. And second, British national capability, American capability is declining. So when people study British cross-strait policy or China policy, we all know that they say we maintain one China policy. That's it. Okay. However, recently the Biden administration want to bring British their influences into this region.
We are also seeing that Queen Elizabeth II, the aircraft carrier, just visited Asia last year, right?
Yeah, yeah. Those kind of things we can see. Probably, yeah. The United States, they can the closer network with Britain. We know they are all Anglo-Saxons. Okay, so they share very similar point of view, values on the human rights, and also they have history and cultural backgrounds. So it's easy for the United States and UK to use kind of joint security activities. However, like what I say, how far and how deep the UK can get involved in the East Asian politics, we still need to put a question mark. Especially UK, British government, they also have some, say, business, economic relations with China. Okay, the UK still kind of talk about Belt and Road Initiative. They still have very, good economic relation with Chinese government, where they sacrifice their business opportunity with China. This we can keep our eyes on that. But so far, I can say the major actor is still Washington, controlled by Washington. And they want to bring more the kind of alliances, all their friends, bring them into this region to make it, as I can say, a more realist playground. Okay, they want to contain China's rise. That's for sure.
When it comes to Taiwan, there is a piece of news which says the U.S. State Department has changed the wording on its fact sheet for relations with Taiwan. Okay, among the public changes, it no longer included a declaration of its long-term position that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence. And Chinese scholars are accusing the Biden administration for hollowing out its one China policy to counter Beijing. Do you agree? And why now?
I did some research on the United States foreign policies on Taiwan and also cross relations, especially the strategic ambiguity. Okay, and I can say even Biden, when he ran the presidential elections and also when he stepped to the office, he still maintained we call the strategic ambiguity. Okay, I think Chong, you also know what is called strategic ambiguity. Okay, they have very important implication is this provide kind of dual deterrence to both governments across the strait. One deterrence is to Beijing is you need to you cannot use unilateral violent way to Taiwan. The second signal is to the Taiwan independent movement. It deterred the Taiwan independent movement don't cross the red line. However, like what I say, people are saying he's using this kind of salami strategy or salami tactic, slicing salamis piece by piece, not too thin, not too thick. Try to kind of play around with the diplomatic jargons in these areas. My analysis, even they don't mention Taiwan is part of China, and also they don't mention Washington does not support Taiwan independence. It doesn't mean officially Washington support Taiwan independence, right? It's diplomatic jargons. Especially when you try to write a paper on website, it's probably 1,000 words. You need to put a lot of things, right? They put a lot of new ideas. For examples, Taiwan is very important technical partners. We provide technology chips, and Washington and Taiwan need to maintain good relations, able to stabilize the technology chips, electronic chips provided to Washington. So they take out the wording Taiwan is part of China, and also they don't support Taiwanese independent movement. Doesn't mean Washington, they officially changed the one China policy. No. So we don't need to worry about this one too much. However, we can always salami sliding strategy.
Okay, according to your theory, what you said, you once mentioned that Taiwan should be more flexible given that it is sandwiched between two superpowers, the US and China, right? What do you mean by flexibility here?
Yeah, flexibility is more kind of we call civilian term. In academia, there's a rising topic. It's not new. Okay, this is kind of already a not old topic, but not new. Hedging in IR theories. It originated from the discussion about whether the secondary states or small state they're using balancing or bandwagoning. When it's a balancing or balance of power means the small state they join other kind of weaker state and aggregate their capability to balance against a rising power or a power with threat. However, balancing is costly. It's not free. You need to spend a lot of money on building militaries. So there's another saying saying, if not balancing, with bandwagon. Okay, bandwagon means you cannot beat them, you join them. Okay. However, there's also some trade-off for bandwagon because if you bandwagon, or we call eventually subordinate to a great power, you need to do a lot of sacrifice. For example, you need to sacrifice your foreign policy, you need to sacrifice your military autonomy in order to fit the great powers commanding. Okay, so there's also some trade-off for bandwagon. So then people say, okay, then we choose something between bandwagon and balance is hedge. Okay, this first definition of hedging, between balance and bandwagon. Second definition for hedging is you kind of, like what I said before, like what Asian people are doing right now. You spread your bets into different hedge, okay, different basket, okay. Some country they spread their the hedging bets on the economy on one country, and also put the hedging bet on the security on another great powers. Okay, you're hedging the bets. Okay, which means you don't put all the eggs into the same basket. Try to reduce the risk. Then overall, hedging should be also go back to the discussion of alliances. Okay, this is idea from alliances. Then what we learn from hedging is we look at ASEAN, like what I mentioned before. Southeast Asia, they are the very typical and also very good example of hedging, right? Like what I mentioned, they view China as a potential and also huge economic market. Okay, and they are also the major trade partners. Look at RCEP, right? However, when they talk about the security issues, they also want to bring Japan, they want to bring United States people in. So this kind of playing the hedging biz is a very typical case of what we call the hedging.
Okay, I have a following up question. Does it mean hedging against military aggression?
Yes, okay. Hedging is, you can say, you hedge against a potential threats, you hedge against military threats, or you hedge against a potential enemies of great powers.
I have a question, maybe at the end of our discussion, is that I'd like to bring it to the first answer you give when you talk about Ukraine war. You said that Putin should be a rational actor. But my question is, if he's a rational actor, why do so many people think that he's not going to start the invasion, but it turned out that he eventually started the invasion on Ukraine? How do we judge what will happen to the Taiwan Strait? Would China losing its mind and become irrational and then suddenly attack Taiwan, or is it can keep its rationality? How do we know, and how do we judge this?
Yeah, well, like what I mentioned, that when we talk about rationality, we are talking about the benefits and cost, right? You also calculate. All the decision makers, they calculate every day. For Putin or even Xi, okay, let me use the term autocracies, okay. Those people, their supporting rate is not from, we call the voters. They are from their kind of, we call the winning coalitions, small winning coalitions, okay. And Putin, for example, the most dangerous for his political survival is he probably be assassinated or coup by the military personnel. And one thing very important is he lost the war. If he lost the war, he will lose the support from the military personnel, and probably there will be coup in the future. This is he worried. And this is his cost. This is why he devoted himself, spent a lot of money in order to win the war. His definition of war, okay? If he cannot win, like what I say, he needs to face a lot of costs in the future. So he probably need to calculate a lot before he initiated the war, and also even during the war. When he spent more money and more people on the war, he probably want to get more. So now we can say, all the observers say he probably just want the Donbas area, right? Mariupol, he want to get Mariupol. Even some people say probably Kherson is the next target he want to get, because if he can conquer Kherson, and his influence can, sweep to the southern part of Ukraine. Even some people say he want to take the Odessa, because when he take Odessa, he can get to the Black Sea. Okay, so like what I say, if he spend more, he probably want to get more, and after he calculate, if he can get more benefit than he cost, he will stop. The same thing for China. Okay, Chinese leaders, what they want is political survival. The survival of a CCP, right? So if the hawkish voice in mainland China getting stronger and stronger, which means they want the leader to do something on Taiwanese, on the cross-strait issues. And this kind of voices, the hawkish voices, is create danger to Xi's leadership. And we need to be very careful about this situation, about Xi's leadership and his political survival. If he cannot control, or he need to initiate some, we call the military activities in order to satisfy the domestic unsatisfactions or domestic voices, hawkish voices, challenging his leadership, then this is the time we really need to be worried about probably the potential conflicts on the cross-strait. I hope that they will not come. I hope that they will not come. However, let me say that, okay? Human beings, we are kind of evolve, repeat history. What? Because human nature, people say we have aggression. We are like animals. Our nature born as a war animals. Okay, this debate about nature versus nurture. Whether human being born as a war machine or we learn how to fight. This is a very typical debate in the conflict theories. Okay, but realist people always mention that we are what? We have aggression inside our mind. Okay, so this is, we need to be very, very careful if in the future, both Washington, Beijing, and also Taipei controlled by hawkish and realist hawkish, and they open the Pandora's box in East Asia, then we will go back to realist Asia, which is filled with potential military activities, war in the future.
Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Wu and Mr. Kuo. If you like our video, please hit the like button and subscribe on our YouTube channel for more information and insight between Taiwan and the world. Thanks for watching. This is Victoria. We'll see you next time.